This is The Toss-Up, where an expert line panel dissects the hottest stories within the world of sports. From some of the nation's strongest college programs right here in Bloomington to the games and moments that capture the world's attention. It's all right here on The Toss-Up, and it starts right now. The Indiana baseball team was as hot as can be last season entering the final third of the year. They'd won 13 of 14 and were looking like the favorites in the Big Ten before dropping 9 of 11 and taking away an enormous amount of momentum. But then they picked it back up, winning their final 6 games of the regular season before dropping 2 of 3 in the Big Ten tournament and an earlier exit than most expected. The regional round of the College World Series favored 3 of 4 teams travel-wise. Texas was the home team. Texas Southern and Texas A&M were both less than 3 hours from Austin, and Indiana had to travel almost 1,100 miles only to see the hometown Longhorns outlast them in a 3-2 game for all the marbles, despite loading the bases in the bottom of the ninth. With a large amount of that production returning this year, mixed with a new coach with a new attitude, the Hoosiers are ready to get the season going and pick up where they left off. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Toss-Up. My name is Michael Dugan. Joining me on the panel this week, we have Austin Metricardi on the far side, Matt Cohen in the middle, and Jack Grossman right next to me. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Jack, going to you first. First impressions of Coach Mercer, new guy in town.
Oh, it's been all positive so far. There hasn't really been much to kind of go off of other than a few press conferences, a few fall scrimmages. So it's really hard to get a full opinion. He's done the win the press conference thing that we talk about anytime anyone hires a new coach, but at the end of the day, you got to wait to see what happens when they actually start playing games, which thankfully we're getting this weekend starting out with Memphis. So jury's out a little bit, but everything that's come by so far has been positive.
Yeah, I mean, following up on Jack, I've been tweeting out preseason polls for months. I'm really kind of tired of it, ready for a game to finally get going on Friday against Memphis. But I think from these first few press conferences with Jeff Mercer and the Fall World Series earlier, some of the fall games. I know Austin and I, we were at the Fall World Series. Feels like, years ago now, but Jeff Mercer, I think for me, the biggest thing that stuck out is his more modern coaching style. He brings a lot of elements of the modern game, especially base stealing, base running. He's going to be putting up a lot of, more impressive base stealing numbers, but not just base stealing numbers themselves. Like when the Fall World Series, one of the things that stuck out to me was when I believe it was Drew Ashley was kept jumping off third base, faking stealing home, then jumping back, and just totally got in his own teammate's head. And I think that's something we could see a lot of this season as Jeff Mercer tries to incorporate some newer elements of the game.
And you talked about the base running there. That's something that Indiana struggled with the last couple of years. As good of a job Chris Lemonis did, this was never really a strong base running team. And you bring in Jeff Mercer, who was second in the country in stolen bases last year at Wright State. You're going to have a team that runs the bases well, doesn't run into outs, and that's something that Indiana fans should be looking forward to this year and beyond.
Looking at Coach Mercer, just initial impression could not possibly be better, I think. Just from talking to people around the team, I spoke with Austin Cangelosi, who's an alumnus, fan favorite, and he could not speak higher of Jeff Mercer, and that's pretty much been the consensus. I'm excited to see how things work out on the field, but to this point, things couldn't get better as far as first impressions.
Now, there are a couple of good matchups. You guys name-dropped Memphis. That's their opening team this weekend. What are you guys looking for in these first couple of games? Is it a solidified rotation? Is it an uptick in who's producing at the plate? Is it something else? What are you looking for, maybe outside of wins and losses, for us to get an idea of what this team is going to be?
I think that I'm just kind of looking to see the new philosophy take hold. We've seen in the past with Lemonis, under Lemonis, a reliance on the long ball. And the Hoosiers have been very good at that. They hit 68 last year, leading the Big Ten. I'm just looking to see how the play style kind of differs because, as Matt's already mentioned, there's been an emphasis on base running, and Casey Dykes is a guy who's an assistant coach. I believe that Mercer's referred to him as a rock star a couple times, superstar, just a really, really good assistant coach who works with the base running. So I'm excited to see that more than anything.
I think when it comes to some of those home runs you mentioned, I don't really see a big long ball hitter on this team, someone you can rely on constantly like you may have had last year with someone like a Logan Sowers, for example. But I think overall this year what I'm excited to see is the youth of the team. Of the 35-man roster, 20 of them are freshmen and sophomores. So, and that's compared to a 6-man senior class. So I'm excited to see how is Jeff Mercer going to utilize these, especially the freshmen, because at the sophomore class we know a lot more about, and I think arguably is the best group overall on the team just based on potential and talent that's already there. But I think I'm curious to see mostly how these freshmen are going to find roles on this team, who's going to play, where is Jeff Mercer going to play them, and also how much are they going to play.
I want to see what Jeremy Houston looks like offensively. Jeff Mercer has praised him a lot recently going into the season about how much he's made stride-wise offensively. Being a weapon with the bat would be a huge thing for Indiana to get him going. He was touted as a defensive shortstop. Now, he had a little bit of struggles there last year, but if he could get his defensive game back to where we know he can play it and be a threat offensively with the bat, that would be a huge thing for them.
Something that's interesting there is that on Wednesday, Mercer actually said that Houston is, quote, a different offensive player. And that's something that, like you said, Jack, would be enormous for this team.
Yeah, to the fact where Mercer's even considering batting him leadoff some of the time, which is kind of mind-blowing to me considering how good Logan Kalitha was in the leadoff position last year. If Houston's good enough to take the job from Kalitha, that just speaks wonders to how far his game may have come offensively.
Matt, you mentioned the number of underclassmen on this team. Take the sophomores out of that equation. Austin, we'll kick it to you first here. Who are some newcomers that we should remember, think the name of now and remember it later?
I think a guy that you're going to want to watch is Gabe Bierman. He's an Indiana guy, very talented pitcher. He's somebody that Jeff Mercer has sung the praises of recently, and he's a guy that had a lot of hype coming into college. So I think he's the one to watch.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a outside-the-box look at this because Tanner Gordon is not a freshman, but he is a newcomer to this team. Last season with John A. Logan College, NAIA school, I believe, he had 104 strikeouts in 70 innings. If you know anything about baseball, even if you don't know anything about baseball, that's insane. Like, that's, I'm not going to do the math because, journalism major, but that's almost 2 strikeouts per inning. And if he can bring anything like that, and he's already shown he's been able to do it against Louisville, I believe, in the fall series. He struck out close to double digits. I don't remember the exact number, but he's already shown a ton of potential. Logan Kalitha raved about him yesterday at media availability, and he's not the only one. Jeff Mercer's talking about him constantly, even though he didn't actually recruit him. He's a guy that I am really excited to see pitch. He's going to go on Saturday against Memphis.
Yeah, thank you for my answer there, Cohen. But
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for.
You can tell by that reaction.
I'm also going with Tanner Gordon because of how important of a piece he is for this team. You have an ace in Pauly Milto, but the rest of the rotation is new other than that, losing 2 starters from last year's weekend rotation. If Tanner Gordon can step up and deliver the type of results that he did at John A. Logan last year, then you have a really, really, really great 1-2 punch to throw out at teams on Friday night, Saturday, to where looking at postseason play, that's really important down in May with the gauntlet Indiana has late in the season and getting into potential regional and super regional play.
2 other young guys to look at, 2 newcomers to this roster. A pair of Bloomington High School South alumni, Alex Franklin and Tyler Van Pelt, are both very good players. Franklin was one of the best pitchers in the state last year. He had a little bit of injury trouble, but on Wednesday, Mercer told us that he's ready to go and could play a lot of innings for this team.
All right, we're going to cut to break real quick, but coming up after the break, we're going to keep the IU baseball conversation going, and Meredith Strewing is going to join us at the media wall, so stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up. We're talking IU baseball in the upcoming season, but before we keep going, let's toss it to Meredith Strewing at the media wall. Meredith?
Not many people have heard of Bargersville, Indiana. Location just south of Indianapolis, about a 50-minute drive from Bloomington. Population less than 5,000 people. Any native of Bargersville coming to, say, Indiana University might feel like a little fish in a big pond. But Jeff Mercer, the new IU baseball head coach, is keeping afloat just fine. The Bargersville native's father served as IU baseball team's assistant coach in the late 1980s, so IU baseball ran through Mercer's veins right from the start. Before coming to IU, the former first baseman had volunteer coaching positions at the University of Michigan and Western Kentucky. He boasts his most impressive stint at Wright State University, though, his alma mater. He first served as the Raiders' assistant coach, but took over as head coach in 2016. Even though he only coached there for 2 years, his teams won 77 games and qualified for an NCAA regional. He signed Wright State's first top 100 recruiting class and posted 6 wins against ranked opponents, including a series battle against Clemson University. And that was just in his first season. In his second year, Wright State received their first ever top 25 ranking, and they ranked second in the nation for stolen bases with an impressive 130. Although the Hoosiers lost some big arms and powerful bats to the MLB draft last year, Mercer is using the tools he does have to make the most out of this season with a strong roster and unlimited potential. Michael, guys, back to you.
All right, thanks, Meredith. Okay, guys, we're going to play Make Your Case. You're all seasoned vets here. You know the rules. Austin, I'll go to you first. Who's going to be the leader at the plate this season?
I think it's got to be Matt Gorski. He is the closest thing that the Big Ten has to a true five-tool player. He can do it all. That includes hitting for contact and hitting for power. I would expect him to hit for a ridiculous average and also have a handful of home runs to go along with it.
I hate to be redundant, but it's got to be Matt Gorski. I mean, he's picked as the Big Ten preseason player of the year multiple times. I mean, he's led the team in base stealing last year, which again led the team in base stealing last year, and it's going to be probably a higher number this year. So he's not going to be the best. He's not only going to be the best hitter at the plate for IU, but he may also be the best base runner for them as well. I have pretty much complete confidence he's going to lead the team in batting average and run score. I even argue RBIs as well. I think he'll be by far and away the biggest offensive threat here.
Yeah, and Gorski's really an easy answer here because all the reasons you guys mentioned. It was crazy how efficient he was stealing bases last year also. If he could keep even half of that efficiency up with increased amount of attempts, that would be really cool to see. But Logan Kalitha, the leadoff hitter last year, a little bit iffy after the quotes that Jeff Mercer had of whether he'll continue to be so this season. But he's a guy that really does a great job of setting the tone at the top of the lineup. He had a painful stat where he led the country in hit by pitches last year, which is a little unlucky. But if you do it enough, it's something that you think doesn't happen by accident if it happens that often. So I think he's a guy that can set the tone, get on base a lot for the Hoosiers.
Another guy that could be pretty important on offense, Matt Lloyd. We didn't mention him. He was an All-American last year, according to a couple of publications. Huge bat in the middle of that lineup for the Hoosiers.
Matt Lloyd, been here a while, versatile guy. Jack, who's going to be the leader on the bump?
Oh, it has to be Paulie Milto. He's your only returning starter from last year. He is a bona fide ace. I might throw him in the Big Ten Pitcher of the Year conversation. He's that good. If you looked at Indiana last year when they lost 9 out of 11, a big reason they did that was because Milto was hurt for that 2-3 week span. When he's healthy and pitching well, which when he's healthy, he's usually pitching well, he is a phenomenal and really important aspect to everything Indiana's going to do this year.
So I was redundant last time with my answer. I won't be this time. I think generally the back end of the bullpen's actually, no, it's not one guy, but it's probably going to be Matt Lloyd and Cal Kruger, probably going to be the two guys you're looking at a lot back there. They are guys that are going to be rocks back at the end of the bullpen. Jeff Mercer had a quote, it was, if you're in a time of need, you call someone you trust. And those are the two guys that he trusts back there. And if they're picking up saves like they did last year, Matt Lloyd led the teams in saves last year, probably will do that again this year. Those are the two guys that are going to win you games when they're tight at the end, which is going to be important for IU, especially during their Big Ten schedule.
Cal Kruger did kind of fade a little bit down the stretch last year, so I want to see how Jeff Mercer kind of limits his innings. And also, same thing with Matt Lloyd. How much is he going to pitch? We don't really know, considering he wants to play the field trying to go to the next level.
For me, it's easy. It's got to be Paulie Milto. I mean, he has just been a rock for this pitching staff for the last 2 years. Every single time he goes up on the mound, he gives your team a chance to win. And I think that's really all you can ask of a pitcher. He's just, like you said, Jack, he could be a Big Ten Pitcher of the Year candidate. I think it might be between him and Frederickson from Minnesota. Just a very good pitcher.
Who's the most important glue guy, pitcher or fielder?
I think that I'll go with Drew Ashley. I think that he's a candidate to kind of break out a little bit this year. He just does a lot of different things. He can play so many different roles for this team, kind of like a glue guy in basketball. You know, he does a lot of different things. Maybe doesn't stuff the stat sheet, but he can do whatever this team needs him to do to win.
So in a similar light, I will go with IU shortstop Jeremy Houston for this one. Shortstop is one of the more important positions on the field outside of pitcher, and he's going to be the captain of the infield. He's going to be the guy that, I mean, even in practice on Wednesday, everyone was smiling when they were talking to him. He was smiling the whole time. He's a guy that everyone seems to love. So not only is he going to be a guy who's a leader on the field, but I think he's also a leader off the field given the experience he has with this program now. He's a guy who, like Drew Ashley, maybe not put up, the biggest numbers and wowing you with stats, although, as you talked about, if he has this offensive jump that Jeff Mercer's been talking about, maybe that's not the case and he is putting up huge numbers. But either way, he's a guy that's going to be relied on and going to be someone who can put in Sharpie into that starting lineup every single day.
This is good. We differ on, all three of us are differing this time because I'm going with Ryan Feynman, the Indiana starting catcher. You talked about Jeremy Houston being a rock. I think Ryan Feynman's a rock for Indiana, trying to bounce between the pitching staff and the lineup. He's the guy that's kind of just in the middle of everything. He's so good defensively, and he had a big year. He made the Jeremy Houston jump that we're expecting this year last season offensively, and I think he just brings everything together for this team, the way he's able to command the pitching staff and be a leader in the lineup.
Feynman defensively, I mean, you just can't say how good he is. I think that as a sophomore, he's a guy that could have been playing professionally just as a defender. Obviously, his bat has come a long way since then as well, so he's primed for a big year, I think.
Austin, right back to you. Tell me why this team could win the Big Ten. Say a few months down the road, this team ends up winning the Big Ten. It will be because?
The schedule. You look at the Big Ten, and over the past few years, whoever wins the conference, it's all about the schedule. Because in the Big Ten, they don't play a true round robin, so you don't play certain teams. You don't get weekend series against certain teams. I think that the last couple of years, Indiana's been the best team in the Big Ten, but they've had very tough schedule in conference, so they haven't been able to win the Big Ten. This year, they might not be the best team. They might be the third most talented team, but they might have the easiest schedule, and that could work in their favor.
That's a double-edged sword, though, because while it's nice to be able to rack up some more conference wins when you have a lighter schedule, that hurts your NCAA tournament resume.
That's true.
On the RPI. And yes, Indiana does go out of conference and play Kentucky into Louisville in May, but when you're in the Big Ten, you need to play the best in the Big Ten to kind of build up that RPI, that NCAA tournament resume. Indiana has more pressure on them to win, especially early in the season. You can't have a tough stretch like losing 9 out of 11 when you're playing Indiana's schedule this year.
I'm not too worried about the RPI this season just because of how good the non-conference schedule is going to be. Is it, a brutal non-conference schedule like the likes of Minnesota's non-conference schedule? No. But you got 2 games against College World Series participants last year, including the defending national champion. You've got a team out of the SEC, Kentucky, who was probably the biggest snub from last year's tournament. Louisville's going to be a top 10 team this season. Coastal Carolina's a ranked team this season. UConn's going to be a good team this season, I think, too. So I don't think I'm too worried about the RPI. My answer is the same as Austin's, however. The schedule's going to be why they win the Big Ten if they win it. And just because you have 3 games against Minnesota in Bloomington. Probably the toughest series is 3 on the road in Ann Arbor. They have 3 at Illinois, I believe, also. But outside of those 9 games, there's not a ton of games in the Big Ten I'm worried about. The only other top team in the Big Ten they play is Purdue, and that's a non-conference game. They don't play Ohio State, who made the tournament last year. So I think if you're Indiana, the reason why you win the Big Ten is because you just avoid some of the top-tier teams in the Big Ten. And when you do play the top-tier teams in the Big Ten, it's either here or not many games.
There is a difference, though, between playing a bunch of great teams non-conference wise, which Indiana is doing to their full credit, and getting those 3 weekend games against really quality opponents week after week after week. So I think even though Indiana did a great job non-conference scheduling, the fact that they don't get to play the top teams in the Big Ten every weekend will end up hurting them if they lose a few games.
And in all honesty, that could be a good reason to maybe say start conference play a little earlier. And The weather doesn't really help with that, obviously, because we're
Yeah, you
north.
can't do that in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
You got
but
teams like Minnesota.
There have been theories floated that maybe you could have a conference series earlier in the year and you could play it at a neutral site. Maybe you go down to Florida and you play it down there. It's not ideal, but it is how you move closer to having a stronger schedule.
I'd rather move the season later.
I would like that as well.
And they should not be playing baseball in mid-February.
Well,
They just shouldn't. They should move the season later to where the NCAA tournament doesn't start until mid-June instead of late May. Give the teams a few weeks, especially when you're in the Big Ten and you can't play a home game for 2 months. That's just, you shouldn't be able to have that set up, but that's what NCAA baseball stuck with.
Yeah, but at the same time, even if you move the start of the season earlier and play a full round-robin schedule, the Big Ten, frankly, just isn't as good as conferences like the SEC and the ACC. So if you play the whole conference, fine, but if only teams like Michigan, Minnesota, Indiana, maybe Illinois, maybe Purdue and Ohio State, but beyond those 5, I really think only 3 of those are locks to actually make the tournament. If the conference isn't that great, does it matter if you play all the teams?
It doesn't.
Well, to be fair, Nebraska and Iowa, you didn't mention, those are 2 programs that are usually decent at worst.
It's never going to be what the gauntlet the SEC teams.
Oh, of course. You're not going to have 10 ranked Big Ten teams
Right.
because they are north of the Ohio River and the geography works against them.
I think the point that's trying to be made is we need to figure out a way to where Indiana could play 4 ranked teams or 4 tournament teams in weekend series instead of just 1 or 2.
All right, it's time for the lightning round. We're going to condense this up a little bit. Tried to step in there, but didn't want to get in the way. 10 seconds or less is what your answers have to be. I'll ask you 4 questions. Keep each answer at 10 seconds or under. Austin, I just asked you a little bit ago why they could win the Big Ten. Give me your take, what you think they will or they will not win the Big Ten.
I don't think they will win the Big Ten because I think if they do, they need to have a lot of things break in their way, and Indiana just hasn't had that luck in recent years.
They'll finish 3rd in the Big Ten because their schedule may be the easiest, but they're the 3rd best team.
Yeah, I don't think they win the Big Ten either, just because we've seen Indiana kind of focus more on the out-of-conference games because that's where you can really get your best wins.
Now, pending a slew of injuries or some unfortunate, unforeseen circumstance, what will make this season a success?
How about hosting regional? That's something Indiana hasn't done in a long time. Get fans to Bart Kaufman Field in late May and just give them something to be excited about late in the year.
I think a Big Ten title more so than hosting a regional, because if you win the Big Ten, you'll probably host a regional, where at minimum still be inter-regional, but I'd look at more winning the conference in Jeff Mercer's first year.
I am going to go ahead and say a super regional appearance because Indiana's been getting to regionals. Now take that next step. Get to a super regional. I know it's tough for Jeff Mercer in his first year, but there should be an expectation.
It's a lot easier to get to a super regional if you host a regional.
That's true. And it's a lot easier to host a regional if you win the Big Ten.
Everything's coming together here. Will they get to Omaha?
They've been picked as a sleeper team by a publication or 2. I don't think they do.
I'm going to go with the one-word segment here early. No.
Yeah, I don't think they do either. I think they can get to a super regional, though, and if they do that, then it's a highly successful season.
The tease extraordinaire, Matt Cohen, just teased the final question. It is last word. What is everybody's last word? Hopefully in 10 seconds or less, unless you pick a word I've never heard of that lasts longer than 10 seconds. Your last word on this upcoming Indiana baseball season.
Warm. Let's get to spring.
Anticipation and curiosity. I'm going to go with 2 words.
Come on,
there.
Matt. Come on
I
now.
know,
You're better
sorry.
than me.
I'm going to go with depth.
Okay. All 4 of those words were
Yes,
great.
yes. Hey,
Thanks,
there's 4
Matt.
people on the panel, right?
Yeah,
I'm
you're
just
right.
I'm just thinking
you're
your
making up
word.
for me. I appreciate that. I like that. All right, guys, thanks for coming on. And that does it for the show this week. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions that you may have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. We'll see you next time.